By the time the third police cruiser skidded to a halt in front of my house, I was already on the porch, barefoot, flannel pajama pants sagging slightly at the waist, cradling a 12-gauge shotgun. Not aimed, not cocked, just holding it like a weary dad lugging a folded lawn chair, reluctant, annoyed, and fully ready to set it down the second someone stopped yelling. Unsurprisingly, the screaming came from Beverly Clean, president of the Maple Hollow Estates HOA, in full-on banshee mode right on my lawn. She shrieked, waving a manicured hand at me like she was signaling a latte order instead of summoning an armed response. She claimed I threatened her, promised to blow up the board, was armed and dangerous, and, of course, was refusing to pay the special assessment. I squinted under the glare of a dozen body cameras and 3 neighbor phones. Behind the officers, the rest of the board huddled like frightened clipboard-wielding cultists in capris and golf polos, stuck somewhere between a neighborhood meeting and a lost tourist troupe. One cop barked, telling me to set the shotgun down. I exhaled, lifted a fraction, and explained as patiently as I could manage that, yes, that had been my goal all morning, but Beverly had forced me to pick it back up. Somewhere across Maple Hollow, a low boom rolled like distant thunder. Everyone froze. Then a second blast hit much closer, rattling windows and popping a sprinkler head on the Ferguson's lawn. Smoke spiraled up behind the HOA clubhouse. Beverly went pale. I looked at the officers and said calmly, that would be the trunk full of illegal fireworks I've been trying to warn them about. 2 weeks earlier, my worst worry had been crabgrass. I was 37, an IT engineer working from home in quiet Maple Hollow Estates, a meticulously curated subdivision in Brookside Ridge, where every house looked like the same Pinterest board in slightly different beige tones. I liked things simple, mowing on Saturdays, grilling on Sundays, walking my dog Pixel at night with noise-canceling headphones, and a silent plea that no one attempt casual conversation about mulch. I bought the house in spite of the HOA, not because of it. Back then, it was more rumor than force. Old bylaws, a faded pool bulletin board, and a yearly meeting attended by exactly 3 people and a sweating Costco cheese platter. Everything changed when Beverly Clean moved in. She was exactly the age where every sentence began with "actually," and every hobby was community improvement. Within 3 months, she'd unearthed the bylaws, resurrected the HOA, and installed herself as president with the smug efficiency of someone who once forced an entire office to sign a birthday card for a co-worker they hated. She rebranded Maple Hollow as Premier Community, sending cheerful emails about trash compliance, holiday decor, and lawn tone consistency. Then, one Tuesday morning, the certified letter arrived that detonated my quiet life. Notice of special assessment, $100, $327.16. The bill was due in 30 days. According to Beverly, I owed $100,000 for unauthorized structural alterations, repeated lawn violations, and negatively impacting property values. I read it 3 times. Then I did what any rational adult man would do when confronted with a 6-figure invoice for simply existing. I laughed, right up until Beverly tried to actually collect. At first, I assumed it was a clerical glitch. I went to the next board meeting at the converted clubhouse conference room, wearing jeans and a carefully neutral expression. Beverly, in a blazer that screamed local news interview, clicked through a slideshow titled Maple Hollow, Taking Back Our Neighborhood. She said my name without looking up from her laminated agenda, announcing that my violations were extensive. I asked her what she meant. She turned the laptop toward me. It was a collage of photos that were technically in my house, if you squinted and ignored reality. One image showed my rain barrel, labeled Unapproved Water Storage Device, Mosquito Threat. Another was my small side yard shed, labeled Illegal Outbuilding, Possible Commercial Use. A close-up of my porch light read, Non-conforming Fixture Glare Pollution. I told her she had to be joking. She purred that the bylaws were crystal clear. Section 4, Article 9, no outbuildings, sheds, or auxiliary structures without prior board approval. My shed wasn't on file. That was a $5,000 violation per month. I said it was just a Costco kit for my lawnmower. She tapped her pen, smiled, and said the mower counted as a business asset. Then she asked if I was running an unlicensed landscaping operation. I stared at her. She stared back, eyes gleaming with the joy of someone who finally had a real villain to point at that wasn't gluten or screen time. From there, it spiraled. I started getting daily courtesy notices taped to my front door. Things like, your recycling bin lid is ajar. Your Halloween pumpkins remain on the porch as of November 4th. Your dog's barking is disruptive to community tranquility. She photographed everything. First from the sidewalk, then my side yard, then my backyard. I caught her once leaning over my fence, phone pointed at my windows. She sang that she was just documenting. I told her it was trespassing. She smiled the tight, self-righteous smile of someone who genuinely believed the rules didn't apply to them. Not trespassing, she said, if it's for the safety of the neighborhood. And she added that I had refused to pay the assessment. By week 2, she had emailed my mortgage company. Week 3, she posted on the community Facebook group, accusing me of creating a hostile environment and threatening the board. My neighbor Tom texted, asking why Beverly claimed I threatened to bring weapons. I replied simply, she was on a power trip. Mistake number 1, underestimating the depth of that trip. The real turning point came Thursday at 6:12 a.m. I opened the front door to let Pixel out and found a final notice of lien zip-tied to my doorknob. I read it twice. The HOA, led by Beverly, had supposedly voted to place a lien on my property for non-payment of the $100,000 assessment. The document had official-looking seals and a fancy, very fake-looking stamp at the bottom. My spidey sense tingled. So I did something Beverly didn't expect. I called a lawyer, Ortiz, a sleepy man who specialized in HOA insanity, his website's words, not mine, looked over the papers and snorted. This isn't a valid lien, he said. It's cosplay paperwork. She filed nothing with the county. She's trying to scare you. I asked what I should do. He told me not to pay, document everything, and call the cops if she threatened me again. He also said the special assessment was never properly voted. She was making numbers up. Armed with that knowledge and a folder full of screenshots, a part of my brain usually reserved for debugging servers clicked into action. I began saving everything. Every creepy photo slipped under my door, every anonymous property values complaint, every time she stepped on my lawn to peek through my windows. Escalation came a week later. I was in my garage, cleaning my legally owned shotgun, a ritual twice a year, drilled into me by my dad, when Beverly marched up the driveway with 3 board members. She announced this was my final chance to avoid further action. I set the unloaded shotgun on the workbench, wiped my hands, and said, "Good morning, Beverly," and reminded her she was trespassing. She said I had 48 hours to pay $100,327.16 or face foreclosure. I told her that wasn't how this worked. Ortiz confirmed it. She snapped she didn't care about my ambulance chaser lawyer. They had authority. One board member, Paul, shifted nervously. She told him to be silent. I pointed to my garage security camera. "You're being recorded," I said. Her eyes flicked from the camera to the shotgun. Something mean passed across her face. "He's armed," she whispered, asking if everyone saw. "Armed and threatening." I replied, "No, it's unloaded. It stays on the bench." She smiled. 2 hours later, I was eating a sandwich when the police arrived in force. Beverly had called 911, claiming an angry, armed resident threatened to shoot the HOA board. Words like unstable and dangerous were thrown around. That's when I calmly picked up the shotgun again, muzzle pointed at the ceiling, finger nowhere near the trigger, and stepped onto the porch to meet a wall of badges and shouting. I followed the rules, set it down when told, raised my hands, answered questions, and pointed out my doorbell and garage cameras, all recording the prior interaction. As officers fanned out, radios crackling, one phrase came over the air that changed everything. Reports an explosion behind the HOA clubhouse. Possible illegal fireworks, or explosives, smoke visible. I slowly turned to Beverly. Her face had gone a precise shade of white, reserved for people who suddenly remember exactly what they left in a locked storage unit. The fire department arrived quickly, but the ATF arrived faster. Maple Hollow's Pride and Joy Community Beautification Storage Unit behind the clubhouse wasn't just holding folding tables and spare mulch. It also contained thousands of dollars worth of high-grade fireworks Beverly had been stockpiling illegally, about 10 feet from a gas-powered backup generator. Later rumors blamed a bored teen, but the fire report cited an unknown ignition source. The heat cooked the rest, and the entire unit erupted like a patriotic volcano. Explosions attract attention. Explosions next to a residential clubhouse, combined with 911 call about an armed man supposedly threatening to blow up the board, attract federal attention, while officers reviewed my security footage, showing me calmly enduring her fake lean threats. Shotgun sitting like a prop, the fire marshal approached, lips thin, asking who was responsible for the storage unit. Beverly half raised a hand, then hesitated. "The board is collectively responsible," she mumbled. Pressed further about who signed leases and purchase orders. She admitted she had done so as president. The fire marshal scribbled something on his clipboard that made her visibly shrink. Ortiz, my lawyer, had arrived after an excited phone call. Tie crooked, eyes gleaming, he whispered, "You recorded everything, right?" "Every second," I replied. "One officer told me they reviewed my footage. I hadn't threatened anyone, and my firearm had remained unloaded and stationary until they arrived. They weren't pursuing anything against me." Beverly spun, sputtering accusations. I was dangerous, harassing the board. The officer replied flatly. Her own repeated trespassing and false claims to dispatch were the real problem. Another officer added that the county had no record of her lien documents. If anything, it looked like I had fabricated a legal notice. Ortiz made a little happy lawyer noise. The fire marshal added that the fireworks exceeded legal consumer storage limits and lacked any required permits. For the first time since she arrived, Beverly looked small. Something in my chest unclenched. Officers asked if I could provide copies of all my documentation. Emails, notices, videos, everything. I smiled slowly, a little tired, maybe a little vindictive. "You're going to want a bigger flash drive," I said. The fallout came in waves. First, criminal charges. Beverly was formally charged with filing a false police report, harassment, trespassing, attempted mail fraud, impersonating a public official, and, thanks to the fireworks, citations from ATF and the fire marshal for illegal storage of explosives and reckless endangerment. The clubhouse explosion had blown out half a wall and singed ornamental shrubs, a tragedy Maple Hollow would gossip about for decades. Second, civil suits. Armed with Ortiz and a Google Drive folder of HOA nonsense the size of a small audiobook library, I filed for harassment, defamation, and emotional distress. Other residents quietly joined once they realized they too had been hit with fake assessments and threats. Beverly had counted on their fear. Third, the meeting. Not a trial, but it might as well have been. The emergency community meeting was held in the school gym, the clubhouse still a crater, smelling of melted plastic and shame. I sat in the second row, arms crossed, while Beverly, hair less perfect, blazer gone, tried to spin her story. She stammered about protecting property values. 50 sets of eyes filled in people like him, however they saw fit. The guy with the old truck, the family with too many kids, the couple with the bright yellow door. The HOA's emergency compliance officer from a management company finally spoke. She laid it out clearly. Beverly had acted far beyond her authority. Fabricated fines, misused HOA funds to buy illegal fireworks, abused emergency services, and exposed the community to enormous liability. Beverly's composure cracked. "If I had just paid the assessment," she began. The officer snapped. There was no assessment. She made it up. Murmurs rippled through the bleachers. Someone yelled about purple flowers being deemed a hazard. Another about banned garden gnomes. The room erupted. Homeowners realizing the emperor not only had no clothes, but had been charging them a nudity fee. Finally, the officer banged a gavel she brought purely for drama. She announced Beverly's immediate removal from the board, barred from any HOA leadership position, and reported to the state for further sanctions. All eyes turned to me. The officer acknowledged I was Beverly's main target and asked if I had anything to say. I stood, weighing a speech, a rant, or a triumphant, "I told you so." Instead, I looked at Beverly, then the crowd. Next time someone tries to charge you $100,000 to store a lawnmower, maybe don't let them buy fireworks with your money. Laughter, sharp, relieved, a little bitter. The vote was unanimous. Even Beverly's husband raised his hand. Beverly was convicted on lesser charges, given 2 years probation, and slapped with fines so severe she had to sell her premier community house and move into a modest apartment with no HOA. Her new landlord, rumor said, immediately informed her she had zero authority over tenants' decor, pets, or window treatments. When the verdict was read, Beverly sat pale, hands folded, expressionless. Each fine rattled off. $20,000 for illegal fireworks, $15,000 of false police report, $30,000 restitution to homeowners. The total, $97,000. She blinked slowly, shoulder sagged, lawyer touched her arm, but she barely noticed. She stared at the table as reality settled over her like a weight she couldn't shake. As the bailiff called for everyone to rise, she lagged, her husband gently tugging her to her feet. She walked out without looking at anyone, designer purse hanging limply. The woman who once ruled Maple Hollow had become just another defendant leaving family court on a Tuesday.